So welcome back. I hope you enjoyed learning about opportunities with our Expo participant organizations. And I hope you got to network and learn a lot about the amazing things that people are doing, and hopefully that leads to future conversations and collaborations. So our next activity is a roundtable on innovating equality, women at the forefront of AI. This roundtable will be moderated by Clara Maria Bozo, who is a former senior corporate counsel at Microsoft and investor. She's a senior legal executive with broad experience on technology and innovation and extensive work on compliance and diversity and inclusion, and a member of Women Corporate Directors in the Argentina branch. Clara is a technology investor and served over 16 years as commercial legal director of Microsoft Argentina with responsibilities over compliance and corporate affairs. She was LATEM-wide senior corporate counsel for the financial tech, AI, defense, and public sector industries, leading digital transformation initiatives and the diversity and inclusion lead for LATEM for Microsoft, and she is currently a member for Harvard Global We programming team. Over to you, Clara. Oh, go ahead.
Good afternoon, all. It's a great privilege for me to introduce the first activity of today's afternoon, which is going to be our annual student alumni roundtable. This year's roundtable is going to focus on artificial intelligence and innovation and their impact on gender equality. As you all know, Harvard Global We is an organization dedicated to the empowerment of women through education, dialogue, and including and connecting individuals working worldwide to support women's rights. And it's exactly within this framework, so to speak, that we decided to make artificial intelligence, and in particular its focus and its connection with gender equality, the subject matter of our 2024 roundtable. You know that everybody seems to be talking about and thinking about AI these days, but the truth of the matter is AI and machine learning have been around for decades. Companies have been focusing on them for decades. Probably the point is that since the year 2017, we started to see the results of all those efforts, probably due to the cloud computing power and the huge amounts of data available to train the AI systems. And to reflect on this fascinating topic, we have today, by alphabetic order, Lacey Garcia from Willow, Cass Matthews from Microsoft, and Ramon Tapchiang from Google. Lacey is the founder and CEO of Willow, an award-winning wealth tech platform powering financial advisors' acquisition, growth, and retention of tomorrow's investors. Willow utilizes generative AI and semantic matching to match consumers with advisors based on multiple financial and personal characteristics. Lacey and Willow are frequently featured in the media, including The Today Show, Cheddar News, Think Advisor, Financial Planning, Business Insider, WealthManagement.com, Yahoo Finance, and Go Banking Rates. Cass joined Microsoft's Office of Responsible AI as Assistant General Counsel in late 2022. She previously spent 10 years at Google exploring socio-technical challenges as the head of legal for Jitso and helping build breakthrough technology as a product counsel at X. She taught media law for many years at the University of Melbourne and international business law at Cardozo School of Law in New York. And last but not least, Ramon is a legal director at Google. He leads a team of product counsels who advise Google Cloud, including its AI services on privacy, regulatory compliance, and AI safety and principles. He was previously counsel to Alphabet's Access Unit and patent counsel to Google. Prior to Google, Ramon was a patent prosecutor and litigator at Fish and Richardson, PC. Thank you, Lacey, Cass, and Ramon for being here with us today. We really appreciate that. Looking forward to the discussion. And let me kick us off by asking Cass to share her views on the bias issue. As I understand, it's a matter that has been the focus of Microsoft's analysis for quite a long time, in particular for Brad Smith, the Microsoft president and chief legal officer. And when I talk about the bias issue, I refer to the impact of having vis-a-vis not having equally diverse amounts of data when AI systems are trained. In other words, how much that can impact the end results, the conclusions reached, and what ethical considerations, therefore, we need to take into account at the time of doing that training. Yes.
Thank you, Clara.
I shouldn't have taken my glasses off because you think that you can more than you do, but actually, I can't. So,
thank you. Hi, everybody. We absolutely do spend a lot of time thinking about this at Microsoft because it's really critical to ensuring that the technology that we're making available is fair and inclusive. So as you kind of started talking about, one of the significant sources of bias is the data. It's not the only source, but it is a significant source. And that's really because a lot of the models, the large models that we're talking about recently, are trained on huge amounts of data that reflect the world. So this bias is unfortunately coming from the world. And what that looks like when you build that into the systems, if you're not taking appropriate measures to mitigate that bias, is that in, for example, chatbots, you might see biased language emerging that we see as cultural norms. And we may, in the case of image generation systems, see images being reflecting stereotypes that we might see in the real world. For example, you might see a disproportionate number of doctors that are artificially generated being white males. That's really reflecting what we're seeing in society. And this is not a theoretical issue at this point in time. Like, this is really happening. We can point to many examples of real world technology that's out there that has been found to be discriminatory, and companies have had to then, grapple with that, pull it down, work out how to fix that and build it better the next time. So these AI systems can reflect and mirror the bias in society, but it's actually potentially worse than that, because due to the scale of this technology and the impact of this technology, it can actually amplify those biases. So it really is something that we need to be paying a lot of attention to, particularly where we are looking at issues or bias that may impact rights or opportunities for women or other minority groups. The good thing, though, is that this has really become a dominant conversation within the field of AI. And that's a great thing because, where there's conversation, there's action. And bias is, it's new. That dominance of this conversation is new, even though, as you said, this is, AI is not particularly new, and certainly bias in data that's being used for training is not new either. But because of this focus that we've had on AI, because of the huge leaps in AI technology over the last year, the focus has really brought us to thinking about this in a kind of more of an open way. And more people are engaging with this conversation. And therefore, what I really do see, and I hope we can talk a little bit more about today, is an opportunity. We have now the opportunity to talk about this, not only address the problem, but make it better. Like, we can have these tools actually correct some of the bias that we see in the real world. And that's fantastic, having this technology move more towards human flourishing.
Absolutely. So we just heard about the importance of spotting and dealing with bias when training the AI systems. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you have this risk of perpetuating disparities, existing disparities. And I imagine that one way to deal with the issue could be running regular audits, assessments to see where we are at, where the opportunities for corrections are, and to act, immediately or as soon as possible thereafter. So I also like to get Lacey's views on this topic, as I know that you use at Willow AI. You have built-in AI into your platform, and it would be interesting for all of us to listen, your learnings, your experience, and also, the correction measures to either avoid or deal with the bias risk and the best practices that you use at the company.
Thank you, Cass. I think I love how you ended that, by the way, on human flourishing, because I think that's one of the things that I'm the most excited about with AI is not this fear of AI replacing humans, but the ability for AI to make us more productive, smarter, more efficient, but also to where we can train models and we can also reformat data, say, for the inference phase, which is one of the things we do at Willow, which I'll talk about in just a moment, where we can actually remove or do our best to really remove bias as we move forward with AI platforms. So a couple things. First is what's really important. I think one thing is whoever is actually training the model, the humans, making sure that team is diverse, right? Making sure, I know I give a lot of props to one of my co-founders and our chief technology officer, who is a man, but he's made it a mandate from day one that he has a majority women kind of led our tech team. And our developers are now, I think we're at about 60% women, but we've kind of been at least 70 to 60%. And one of the reasons, because we are really focused on women and on next gen audiences at our platform. And so making sure that removing bias is critical in everything that we're doing. But the people who are actually cleaning up and auditing and checking the data, I think making sure that they have those that ability to see, wait a second, for instance, the doctor example, or if we're looking at, nurses shouldn't all be women, right? Or, CEOs should not be all men. Those are just some kind of high level examples. I think also, as I mentioned, so there's the training phase and then there's that inference phase. And one of the things that we're doing, so at Willow, what we do, one aspect to our, so we use semantic AI matching, which actually is a little bit different because it isn't necessarily relying on historical data. We're able to build off of client profiles or investor profiles and advisor profiles, and then actually match on kind of new data sets. But one of the things that we're doing is, because obviously historically the majority of financial advisors out there have been men, and the majority of investors have been women. Have been men, not women, right? Women have been underserved by this market. And so, for instance, if you look at a typical financial advisor biography, it talks about things that maybe, and I'm using bias in these statements, but that are more important to men, just where they went to school and sort of investment performance, and less of a focus on some of the things that we know are really important to a lot of women, a lot of younger investors, more about somebody's actual experience from a life journey perspective, kind of who they are as a person, what their personality traits are, why they actually got into this field and why they want to work with clients and help them with their finances. So we've gone ahead and reformatted the profiles that we're using in the inference phase to help to remove some of the bias then beyond just the training, but in terms of that phase where we're not just going back to the historical data that is obviously one of the things with these big AI models is that you need lots and lots of data typically for AI models. And it is, as Cass mentioned, it is inherently biased, but that's one way in which we're kind of removing the data, the bias in what we're doing from a matching perspective.
That's excellent. It's an excellent practice and maybe Cass can get a step further and build on that and comment on your own best practices at Microsoft to deal with or mitigate the bias risk.
Yeah, I can. Excuse me, sorry. I think the first thing to acknowledge here is really the responsibility of those who are building the technology and using the technology to be aware of this harm and to really make sure that they're not perpetuating it when they're building or putting this technology out there. And I think that's a lot of what you just spoke about in terms of what's happening at Willow. So it's fantastic to see that. So how can we make the most of this opportunity to correct the bias that we may see in society and move us more towards this beneficial result from this AI technology? I can kind of take a little step back and talk about how we frame this as one of the harms at Microsoft. So this is one harm that AI can put out into the world. And when we think about how we approach Microsoft AI from a responsible AI perspective at Microsoft, that's what the team that I sit within is responsible for. We think about how we're going to build the internal and external policy world in Microsoft so that we are making sure that it's coming out and reflecting the values that we have. So we have a bunch of principles that we put in place in 2017, and then we built tools to make sure that the tools being standards and guidelines to make sure that the principles are being reflected. So when we look at the bias issue, we're thinking about our fairness principle primarily. And so we have a principle that we want all of our AI technology to be fair. But it's a pretty tricky thing to say to the teams that are building this technology, make sure it's fair. They need to have steps and things in place to ensure that they're getting to an outcome that is fair. And so one of the main ways that we do that is via our impact assessment. It's something that we've made available publicly as a template, so you can see the steps that we go through for every AI system at Microsoft to make sure that we are mapping the potential harms, in this case bias, measuring the potential harms, and then mitigating them, because we don't put the technology out until we've gone through that entire cycle, which is an ongoing process. So we make sure that there are really concrete steps along each of those ways. There's many things you can do, even if you are starting with inherently biased data, and there's a lot you can do to the actual data, but there's also you can do after the data. There's lots of steps you can do to correct that bias before you make the technology available. And so I'll talk about just a couple of those. One is red teaming, which has become critical to our AI, responsible AI practice at Microsoft. It's something, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, it's something that comes from more our cybersecurity side of the world, where we essentially have teams of experts that try to break the system. So in this case, they would be trying to make it produce things that are not great for women or other minority groups. Make it do things that you don't want it to do, essentially, because that gives you then the opportunity to see where the problems are coming up and how to fix them. So we can see through this process of red teaming, is this particular tool not showing up well for women? And we can then fix it. And it's important, as Lacey pointed out, that the people who are asking those questions and then looking at the results and implementing the solutions are also women in the case of those solutions, in the case of that gender bias issue. And so to have those diverse groups of people and perspectives coming into that. Another thing that I'll mention is that Microsoft has been trying to make it easier for people to do this, right? Like we think a lot about how to help our customers use this technology for the benefit of everybody. And mostly people don't want to put out biased systems. They don't want to put out systems that are going to perpetuate these harms, but they may not necessarily know how to. We're all learning in this space, so they may not necessarily know how to detect it and to mitigate it. So we've been really trying to build out our tools that we make publicly available for people to use so that they can look at it in the context of their system and think about learning how to detect the bias and also to measure it and then to mitigate it.
And I imagine that, being part of the responsible AI team means also dealing with some tension, no? with business teams, where business teams want to, move on one direction and you guys spot some issue and you need to say, well, the fairness principle is compromised, or, the inclusivity principle may not be being taken into account here and there. So it sounds fantastic, easy on the surface, but it's not an easy job at all. And
it's not easy. And on that point, I think it's really important that you have that kind of cultural shift if you need it internally in companies, so that people are recognizing it's not just the Office of Responsible AI that has to care about this, or the lawyers or any other discrete group. It's actually everybody building the technology has to understand why we have these principles and why we're doing responsible AI. And so it's being built in by design. And I think a lot of that, the way we get away with that at Microsoft a lot is that we have top-down buy-in. So we have really good top-down support, which really helps with both the visibility and the accountability.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you very much. So we talk about this bias risk, which is crucial. And I would like now for us to move a little bit further and get into the potential of AI. Lacey was saying at the beginning, well, we are here to focus on the opportunities that AI provides us with. No? And one of these areas of opportunity certainly is the area of hiring, how to use AI tools and systems to make hiring processes more inclusive and less subject or affected or negatively impacted by gender disparities. And to discuss that, I will ask Ramon to share with all of us this afternoon his views, your company's views on the potential of AI on this particular area, please.
Yeah, thanks, Clara. I was going to share some statistics with you all, but actually, I might just ask each of you in the audience generally for your opinion on two questions. One is, would you prefer to have an AI system pre-screen your job application or a human? That's the first question. Second question is, would you rather have an AI system make the final decision on who to hire or a human? So for pre-screening, who would prefer an AI system? About half, maybe more than half. And for making the final hiring decision, who would prefer an AI system?
A lot of faith in AI. That's great.
Maybe two. Good. So this Pew survey that came out last year, about 50% of people preferred to have an AI system do the pre-screening. And on the final decision, only 25, I think it was less than 25, but 75% were firmly against it.
Can I ask a question about 50%? Did anyone look at what the demographics were? Because I can imagine that someone who is more inclined to benefit from the status quo might vote one way, and someone who's less inclined to the status quo might vote a different way.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the themes from today is whether our AI systems, the ones that, say, big companies that like CASA, Microsoft, or Google are building, whether they reflect the biases of the status quo, or actually whether they are more objective or, may be corrected for biases and reflect a better ideal. And then I think if you read stories, it's who decides what the better ideal is. So I'm happy to share the survey link later. So I don't know the answer to your specific question though. But I think it's clear that, AI, these especially people that do a lot of hiring are relying more on computers and more on AI to make the process more efficient. So I think you can see that at the administrative level, just scheduling appointments, or you could have AI write job descriptions so they're not gender biased or alienating to a particular gender or minority group. So that is sort of the first step. But then, like I alluded to, you could see AI systems summarizing resumes and extracting key points for people, or you could imagine systems where they remove information about gender from resumes so that a human screener would see a gender neutral resume. So if you wrote you were the captain of the women's softball team, it would rewrite that as, oh, you were just captain of a athletic team. But then you get into, how do I process 10,000 resumes? AI systems that will either rate or screen out applicants automatically without a human in the loop, so to speak. So those are systems that are coming. And I even saw reports of AI to rate people's performance during an interview by analyzing video. So you'd be scored on your facial expression, I don't know what the plans of these companies are. So I think, there's a vast array of possibility. And I think if you go back to the first question, it's sort of interesting to think about, what one would prefer. So there's a lot of activity in this space from a legal point of view. I think people are wondering how to regulate this, and I think we'll come to that later.
We will.
Yeah. I'll just point out that New York City has their own law that requires employers to disclose to applicants when AI is being used and to do bias audit reports so that you can go to the website of the company that's doing the hiring and seeing if their AI systems are biased or not. So it's kind of an interesting development.
And that's quite fascinating. And that's going to lead us to the next topic, which is totally related to this, because it's, something that everybody's talking about these days and everybody's concerned, in fact, about, which is the impact of AI on the labor market. So many people are saying, are worried about the potential of AI to take away jobs from people. At the same time, you have the other side of the coin, which is to focus on the potential of AI to give rise to new jobs, which we don't even know about today. We don't know how they will look like in 5-10 years from now. So, I'll take the opportunity to continue discussing with Ramon on this and get your view on, whether or not you think that that's a phenomenon that will impact more negatively women, and if you think so, why you say that?
Great question. I guess just to ground us, I think this boom, and at least in generative AI has been around a long time, as you guys mentioned. But the boom in generative AI, I think, was kicked off, at least in the public view, when ChatGPT was released in November of 2022. So only about 18 months or so ago. I think if you think about when the World Wide Web was made public or published, Tim Berners-Lee put out his idea in 1989. So the equivalent time would be about 1991, and sort of people then trying to look forward to today about what the internet would do. I think it's just really early to speculate right now, all these doomsday ideas that AI will sort of overtake humans and control us are really far-fetched, and there's no sign of that at all. But I did find some research, an ILO paper, the International Labor Organization, and another Pew Research report on the topic. And they both had data suggesting that women would be impacted more than men by this generative AI. And part of that is because the idea or the inference I think people are making is that generative AI is going to hit the knowledge economy, higher paying jobs more than sort of manual work. So tax preparation, lawyers, computer programmers, administrative assistants, accountants, office managers, parts of their jobs are more susceptible to the use of generative AI than, say, if you're in the construction industry and, welding metal bolts together or in agriculture. So I think this sort of very crude analysis, there was a paper also last year from OpenAI, Lundau, where I think it was a much more measured look and found sort of an 80-20 rule that for 80% of US jobs, there would be generative AI would be able to assist with 10% of the tasks. And for the other 20%, maybe it would assist with 50% of the tasks. So I think we'll see, and I'm sure you guys both have similar thoughts, is that what AI, generative AI at least, can do is really augment the ability of knowledge workers to be effective. So hopefully it's a net bonus for all of us and get us home a little earlier.
Hopefully it is. Yeah, that's the hope. And I would like to now, I think it makes sense to reflect on another area of great potential of AI for us as women, or for women, I would say economic growth. And that's the area of how the AI tools can help women entrepreneurs to move forward in their businesses, in their careers. So I'm looking at Lacey because I know Willow, when building AI into its platform, has learned a lot of experience in that particular topic, in how this AI data-driven analysis, market analysis, financial tool planning can be used for the benefit of women entrepreneurship and women empowerment in the economic field, so that they can really, achieve economic independence, which is a great goal for society. So, Lacey, if you want to share with us your learnings.
I'm excited to talk about this, one of my favorite topics. I'm just going to jump on one thing, Ramon, from what which is actually looking at, I don't know how familiar the audience is with the fintech space or the financial technology space, but the biggest trend, or one of the things that investors, that venture capitalists were really, really excited about over the last decade, which now they've moved away from, was actually robo-advisors, right? So machines replacing humans in terms of providing financial advice. And what's actually come through is that people want, at the end of the day, they want help from these financial planning tools. And I'm going to talk about it and how AI can play a very important role. And it's at the heart of what, our platform and what we're doing. But at the same time, what came out of that was now that people still want a real person. So I'm optimistic as I look forward and I think about the real. I'm optimistic that it'll make us more efficient and better at our jobs and help to remove bias. But that was just a little thought there. But yes, as we look at the entrepreneurial space, right, and how can women entrepreneurs especially benefit from AI models and business kind of planning models, and then also financial planning models. And at Willow, we built generative AI assistants to support women along different financial life journeys, or next gen investors, younger investors around different kind of financial life journeys. The same thing can be done to support entrepreneurs and around where they are specific to their industry, specific to their stage of growth, specific to the particular business challenges they're facing. As somebody who's been an early stage, entrepreneur, which is it can be a very lonely process at times, and you're trying to figure out how to make decisions. And Google searching, using a generative AI tool that was trained specifically to address your industry, your stage of growth, taking into all those factors can be a lot more helpful than just the kind of the Dr. Google of the olden days. I think also what's really important here is we know that one of the challenges that women entrepreneurs especially face today and have historically is that they are not as well networked, right? That they don't have as many mentors and sponsors and allies and funders, right? People who are supportive of them from a financial and also from a really relevant advice perspective. And I think that's another thing where I look at how we, for example, like one of the things what we do at Willow, where we're matching, women investors with the right financial advisors, but similarly, women entrepreneurs can be matched with mentors, can also be matched with potential investors, right, through these generative AI tools. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, first just starting with the day-to-day advice where it could be much more relevant and much more helpful, but also then in providing access to real people, to real mentors, and also to potential funding sources. And also there's so many, I think, there's a lot of grants and kind of programs out there that entrepreneurs just don't know about, right? You're so busy running your business and hiring and dealing with all the issues and this and that, and you're not aware, right? But if you plug into an AI tool and put in your information, and all of a sudden then you could be made aware that you're just about to miss the deadline for a grant that your company is like really perfect for. So I think those are just some of the things that are kind of exciting on that front.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also busy and worry about, surviving, which is something that entrepreneurs, have to think about all the time. Yeah. So it's as you said, it's easy to miss opportunities. And if you have the right tools to help you out, I think that can make a huge difference for your business. So that's a fantastic area of opportunity, I think, for AI tools. Let me now, Ramon anticipated that we were going to get into that a little bit, and I would like to not to miss the opportunity to say, just to reflect a little bit on something that is also very much discussed these days, which is whether or not and to what extent government should get into regulating AI. And, this is a complex issue. This is not an issue that we will be able to discuss deeply today, but I just want to put it on the table, so to speak. So we are all aware of that. This is something that requires balancing out different complex matters as well, such as privacy, safety, security, equality, so to speak, the ethical considerations, intellectual property, and people tend to see this. Many tend to see this as a multitask with multi stakeholders efforts, because governments cannot do that by themselves. They need the industry experts, they need the academia, they need the NGOs, and also the interested parties from the civil society as a whole. So this is a work in progress. I like to run it by probably Cass and Ramon later. As I said, we don't have too much time to get deeply on it, but to run the topic by asking maybe how well we are doing, reflecting a little bit on the work already performed, the work ahead, and how optimistic we can be about the end result of the process. Yes.
Yeah, this is something I have a lot of thoughts about because it's one of my main focuses at the moment, to be thinking about the regulation and the evolving regulatory space. And there is a lot of activity in this space right now. It seems at the moment that all eyes are on the EU AI Act, which is a comprehensive piece of regulation coming out of Europe. It is significant because it's been it's the first of its kind, really, and we will start to see that in force probably from June. I think we're going to get the final language in a couple of weeks now, but we've been sort of involved in this conversation they've been having with this act for several years now. They put the first proposal out in 2021. So it has been, I know that, Microsoft and Google in particular have been involved in thinking about this regulation and helping it, provide that industry lens as they've been tackling with some of these very, very difficult issues. But we now are starting to see, as of June, some really concrete requirements. If we think back to what we've been talking about so far today around bias in particular, we're starting to see some real concrete requirements for people building this technology and putting it out there. With huge fines attached, like really big fines. So to the extent that companies haven't been paying attention, they're going to have to start paying attention pretty quickly if they want to be doing business in Europe in this space. So I want to call out a couple of those provisions because we can see where they kind of set a benchmark for where we are at this point in time. So for general purpose AI model providers, that's people who are building things like building and making available things like the GPT series that underpin the ChatGPT tool. Providers will now be required to keep information on hand about data used for training, including evaluation of that data and the methods used to detect identifiable biases. So that's fairly concrete in terms of a requirement. Then if we think also about, this is not exhaustive, there's lots of requirements in relation to data governance, but if we think about what's a requirement on the providers of high-risk systems under the EU AI Act, they're required to conduct examination in view of possible biases that are likely to affect health and safety of persons, negatively impact fundamental rights, or lead to discrimination, and to have appropriate measures to detect, prevent, and mitigate possible biases. So that's kind of, where we're going to see a big shift towards this kind of compliance of these of companies that are making this technology available. We already had laws, though, in place. We already have laws, even without the AI-specific laws, such as the EU AI Act and the New York law that Ramon mentioned earlier. We had laws, for example, we had them for a long time around discrimination. And the FTC has not been shy in letting people know that, letting companies know that they are going to be enforcing those laws in relation to AI. We saw a settlement with Rite Aid at the end of last year, which was pretty significant in terms of putting requirements on companies to, or in Rite Aid in particular, to make sure that they are identifying and mitigating bias. And in that case, they actually banned Rite Aid from using facial technology because they weren't doing it in the way that was in compliance with the law in their view. So regulation will be important, but it's not the only factor that will drive progress towards responsible AI. As countries around the world have really grappled over the past year in particular with getting this balance right between making sure that we can get this technology out there and countries and societies can have the benefit against having the right guardrails in place for keeping people safe. We've seen some really great conversations come at multi-stakeholder conversations and also public-private initiatives, such as we had the voluntary White House commitments that occurred in the US, where a bunch of AI labs came together and made commitments around making AI responsible and safe. So, and that's kind of led to other initiatives such as a Frontier Model Forum, which is a really important way that industry is going to keep themselves in check, like share with each other. What are the best practices? How can we, foster research in this area? How can we pick up what the problems are and, keep ahead of the state of the art, so that we're not relying on regulation? I'll just touch on one point around the importance of multi-stakeholder engagement, which you already mentioned, which is to say that, we do have some dominant voices in that multi-stakeholder conversation. And one of the things that probably does need a little bit more at this point in time in terms of AI is the public, like voices from the public, and maybe direct coming, that feedback. So having those feedback loops where people can say what's working, what's not working, or building civil society more in, I think we'll see some benefit from having that input increased.
Well, it's great that regulation is, making companies look into this bias issue, isn't it? Because that's something that definitely, as you said, they will not be able to ignore those requirements. So it's a way for to help the whole industry and the society as a whole to get this responsible AI for the benefit of all, which is the whole thing should be about that. So Ramon, any thoughts on that you would like to share from your experience at Google?
Yeah, I mean, well, Cass and I are both at large tech companies. I think the question is, again, for people to think, how much do you trust governments? How much do you trust big companies? How much do you trust your peers to build AI systems? And how much would you want to know about them? And again, is this an opportunity, or is it, how much we need to regulate it so it's done properly? I think what's unique about this moment is prior technologies like silicon chips or electricity doesn't really have like the potential to have a values or emotion adjacent sort of input into our lives, whereas AI will give you, a paragraph or a poem or a picture. So it's much more about content. And, I think nobody knows how to regulate that. But the EU would like to be first.
Well, they were first.
So, yeah, the activity in the US, as Cass mentioned, is much I think because it is so controversial, is A, sort of about keeping a check on big tech, but nobody's quite sure what to do. And then B, a lot of concern about China. So there's a lot of geopolitics now coming into it. Like, should we ban TikTok because they might collect data or be able to generate messages using generative AI to influence how you guys vote in the next election. So stay tuned.
Okay, we will. We certainly will. And since we are here at this, prestigious university, let me shift the focus now to the area of education and the potential of AI on education for the, to be used to address, for instance, many people argue that men and women have different learning styles, learning preferences, learning needs, natural needs, however you want to call them. But, there's an opportunity for AI tools to help on that process so that no one is or feels excluded from areas, such as STEM, for example. So I know, Lacey, of your deep background on education, and I'd like to take the opportunity to get your views on this potential to help in this maybe with tailored made learning systems or content specific so that we include all.
Yes, no, I think this is a very exciting area because, as we know, with these generative AI models, right, is that they do take into consideration differences in learning styles, preferences, abilities, and progress. And these dynamic models can adjust, right? So whether or not, and as you look at it, okay, so I'll take a step back. Obviously, we know historically less women and less young girls have gone into STEM, right? And some of this was probably around the way we were teaching and learning styles. But this could hopefully be a thing that we don't have to worry about moving forward, right? If we are really able to adjust how, the first is obviously the assessment to really kind of get to know that person and what their style is, right? So these generative AI assessments can really get to understand somebody's learning preferences, their styles, take into consideration whether or not they're auditory, visual, kinesthetic learner, and then immediately adapt the lesson plans and the content that is needed, so that it's not just it's not just math problems, but then all of a sudden videos are being brought in and whatever it is that person needs, right? And it can be dynamically updating based not just upon the upfront kind of learning assessment and the preferences, but then tracking the progress, right? And the kind of ongoing needs and assessments. So I think that's really, really exciting as, that obviously we know the content possibilities with AI are really endless. And as we look at this, I think also for women and the lens of women and young girls, what's exciting too is, today young girls can get on and speak to AI generated, a Marie Curie, for instance, or Ada Lovelace can have a conversation with someone sort of from the past, right? Who is a huge, female leader in the scientific or in the space, right? And I think that that's something that's also really exciting as we go back to this whole concept of bringing more role models and matching more women as they go through their education and sort of start their career with more mentors, with more sponsors, right? With more folks. So I think that that's another way that this can be really
That's
helpful.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Certainly. So let me take a pause here and ask Leah, whether I have time for one or two more so that I can make a decision. Pardon me? One. Okay. So let me wrap this up. And I think has been, at least, if I've enjoyed this discussion a lot, I think there's so much to learn and we are all eager to, make a progress on this field for the benefit of society and also to address the, gender disparities among so many other disparities. So let's put it that way. But let me close out by asking each of the panelists, and maybe we can start with Cass, about, if you were to give a piece of advice to younger generations, especially, young female who would like to make a career in the AI space, what would you recommend to them?
Yeah, I think I would say don't count yourself out in the AI space if you don't have a technical background or you're not particularly interested in the technical aspects of it, because as we've sort of talked a little bit about today, there's so many aspects of AI and responsible AI in particular that don't rely on that technical expertise. There's other expertise that's really important. When I think about our Office of Responsible AI, we have a huge diversity of backgrounds. It's like education, art, literature, economics, law, policy, like a whole bunch of stuff, including we have a lot of technical expertise as well. But there's a lot of other stuff. And that's what's great about this responsible AI space is that it's not reliant upon only traditionally male-dominated spaces. It's also spaces where women have had more involvement. So we're not starting from behind in terms of responsible AI, and even at senior levels. So it's not just at lower levels. We're seeing that you're able to influence inside tech in any case at a very senior level. With that lens outside of the technical.
I mean, that was actually part of what I was going to say. I think it's really, really great advice. And I think also just, jumping in and really using all these different tools and, getting the real world experience. I mean, obviously I'm in the startup space, and startups are always looking for, for interns or for, whatever stage of career. There's always the opportunity to get in. And I think actually use these tools, really understand them, because, either from a technology background or standpoint, but also just seeing the applicability and the use cases play out and the challenges and the issues on the day to day, we will, continue to evolve where we need to be focused and looking from a responsible kind of AI perspective. And I think that getting that real world experience is so critical. And similarly, make sure that you're proactively going after getting mentors, getting sponsors, right? If this is where you want your career to be, because, I think a lot of times people don't realize that really, if you reach out and ask somebody, they very rarely will say no. They might say no because they're over capacity or whatever, but even when they say no, they'll typically introduce you to somebody else, right? So those would be 2 thoughts.
Yeah, it's hard to add to that. I would say also use these new tools a lot in your own life. Chat GPT, is it Bing GPT as well? And then there's
called Bing GPT.
and Gemini. Okay.
But make sure that you edit, because I will say I've had, resumes and things come to me and I'm like, people could tell if it was just written by AI. So that's one tip I would give to.
Absolutely.
The humans are still important.
The human touch.
Very important.
Yes.
Just use it to augment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the human touch and the human perspective, I think, is and will remain to be so relevant in so many aspects, and that's part of the the hope. But it's a great time to be in the middle of this process. No, it's to be playing a role, from different aspects, including the academia, which is a very important space, as we discussed, for governments to learn, because governments need to learn from the industry, from the civil society, and from the academia. So it's a great time to be part of something which is bigger than ourselves, right? So thank you so much for having been with us this afternoon. I think we can give a round of applause to the panelists. And thank you to the audience for having stayed with us.
Thanks.
Thank you to our amazing panelists and to Clara for bringing them to us. You've given us a great roadmap and a lot of hope for the future of women. And thank you so much. Token of our appreciation, this is a compilation of the winning essays from the first 5 years of our essay contest, where the question is, what is the biggest challenge facing women and girls in your country? So I hope you enjoy reading the thoughts of our young people who are telling us today, these are our problems, solve them for us, work on them so we won't be here tomorrow. And I would say that the most recent contest I moderate in the Philippines are talking about AI. They see it as plus and minus, just like you've told us. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kat.